I'm thrilled to talk to the Windsor Square Hancock Park Historical Society. I am honored that you are joining us tonight, everyone. Before I continue, I want you to meet somebody very important in my life, my darling husband, Bill. When you hear this story, I want you to know we went through all of this together, side by side, and he's responsible for the visual part of this presentation. I think he did a fabulous job. And tonight he is my technical director. And this is darling Bill. Wait a minute, you have to change that. No, they can see. Okay,
they
great.
can see me.
Okay.
No problem.
He's the director, not me.
We see. There we go.
Okay, cool. Now, back in 1978, I led the fight to save Radio City Music Hall from possible demolition. This presentation is based on my book, Saving Radio City Music Hall, A Dancer's True Story, published by Turning Point Press. I grew up in a very pretty little town in New Jersey called the Glen Rock. And we have a great big stupid rock in the middle of our town. And right next door was where my ballet training was, in the town of Ridgewood. My teacher and mentor was Irene Vokine, and she was part of the very famous Russian Vokine ballet family. The world-renowned choreographer, Mikhail Vokine, was her uncle. So she had very deep ballet roots. And all I wanted to do when I was a kid was be a dancer, a ballet dancer. That was the most important thing in the world to me. And I was determined to make that dream come true. Now, Irene Vokine was a brutally strict teacher, but a wonderful teacher. I loved her very much. And when I left her studio, I was pretty much ready for the professional world because thanks to her, I had grown a very thick skin. And I was lucky enough to get into the ballet company at Radio City Music Hall when I was only 18. I was let go twice. You have to read the book to find out about that. But when I came back the third time, they say three's the charm, I ended up becoming the dance captain of the ballet company. Now, before I tell you about this fabulous theater, I wonder how many of you know or remember that the music hall used to show first-run films. It was a wonderful place to see a movie. And I also need to make something very clear. I have been doing this my whole professional life. I was in the ballet company. I was not a rockette. We were two separate groups of dancers. The Rockettes were, and they still are, the stars of Radio City Music Hall. We saw them last night for the opening of the Christmas show, and they were spectacular. And the ballet company, well, we kind of felt like stepchildren because no one even knew we existed. But an interesting piece of history. The Radio City Music Hall Ballet Company was the first permanent ballet company in this country, and I am very proud to be part of that history. Now, the music hall officially opened its doors for the very first time on December 27th, 1932. This year, it'll be 89 years old in a couple of weeks. It was 2 days after Christmas. It was a cold, wet, rainy, miserable night that night, but it was a big, splashy, formal event, and anyone was invited, including Amelia Earhart. The enormous theater was designed by Edward Durrell Stone, and the Art Deco interior was done by Donald Deskey, who was also responsible for the designs of most of the furnishings in the theater. He also designed all the fixtures throughout. Now, Donald Deskey became so famous after the music hall opened that he was asked to endorse products in the popular magazines of the time. Now, all of this awed the first nighters and all audiences since. I am thrilled to say that the music hall. This is the lobby, otherwise known as the grand foyer, and it's the first room you see when you enter the theater. It's magnificent. That huge mural behind the grand staircase, that's titled The Eternal Quest of the Fountain of Youth. And it was painted by the famous artist Ezra Winter. It is said to be the largest hand-painted mural in all of New York City. And it was so big that they had to paint it at an indoor tennis court. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret about this room. Those tall mirrors that you see that go up 3 stories, those mirrors are actually backed with gold leaf, not silver, like most mirrors. And that was to ensure that a soft, warm glow fell over the guests. And it does. The lighting in that room, we were in it last night. It's very unique, very unique. The chandeliers are 29 feet long and they weigh 4,000 pounds. Let's go down to the Grand Lounge. This is another one of Donald Deskey's designs, and it beckons you down a large curved staircase to the Grand Lounge, which is indeed grand in its Art Deco design. The ladies' room down on that level looks like something out of a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movie. And the men's lounge is sublime in its Art Deco design. This mural that hangs in the men's lounge is actually titled Men Without Women. And as you can see, there's a barber pole and a pipe and a razor, all that stuff that you guys do without us. It was painted by the artist Stuart Davis. Now, exhibited throughout the theater are sculptures that were commissioned specifically for the theater. This is a famous statue called The Dancing Girl, and it was done by the artist Robert Laurent. And there's a very famous statue, usually in the Grand Lounge downstairs, it was there last night, titled The Spirit of Dance. This was done by the world-renowned sculptor William Zorich. Both of these statues were cast in aluminum. Now, there were only 2 women that were part of the design team. The first was Ruth Reeves. She was a textile designer, and Cubism had a major effect on her. And she did the wall coverings in the auditorium, and she titled it The History of the Theater. She also designed the carpet in the lobby and the grand staircase. And she titled that Still Life with Musical Instruments. The other woman was Hildreth Meyer. I love that picture. She looks like a no-nonsense woman, doesn't she? Mm-hmm. She was an American sculptor and mosaicist. And she designed 3 rondels representing dance, drama, and song. These are magnificent. They're 18 feet in diameter, and they can be seen on the outside wall of the theater on the 50th Street side. So the next time you're in New York and you're standing there, look up, because they're absolutely beautiful. They were designed by Hildreth Meyer, but they were executed by the artist Oscar Bach. Now, the concept of the theater was from S.L. Rothefeld, otherwise known as Roxy. And he had another great big gorgeous theater exactly 1 block away on the corner of 50th Street and 7th Avenue, known as the Roxy. But the Roxy showed movies and stage shows. And his dream was that the music hall was going to be the showplace of the nation. And it was only going to have live entertainment, no movies. The interior of the theater held 6,200 seats without one obstructed view. And the reason there's no obstructed view is because this beautiful sunburst ceiling is completely suspended from above. The stage is called the Great Stage because Roxy envisioned not only an enormous space, but huge, spectacular productions. Now back to this grand opening in 32. This is the original program from that night. And there were some very well-known performers in that show. And it included the vaudeville stars of the time. And among them that night were Ray Bolger, the Flying Walendas. For culture, there was the Martha Graham Dance Company featuring Martha Graham herself. There were opera stars from all over the world. The newly formed Radio City Music Hall Ballet Company featured the famous ballerina of the time, Patricia Bowman. And of course, that world-renowned dancing troupe, the Roxyettes. They were not known as the Rockettes for another year. Now, this elaborate opening, unfortunately, was a complete bust. It started a half hour late. It lasted over 4.5 hours. People were leaving. They couldn't take it anymore. And when Bill and I were doing the research for this, we found a review in the New York Times. And the quote was, "This show does not provoke much enthusiasm." But the theater, ladies and gentlemen, the theater got rave reviews. Everybody loved it. They had never seen anything like it. And the next morning on December 28th, the New York Tribune had this quote about the theater. "The least important item in last evening's event was the show itself. It has been said of the new music hall that it needs no performers, that its beauty and comfort alone are sufficient to gratify the greediest of playgoers." Now that's quite a review. So after the opening, the board of directors, against Roxy's wishes, decided the only way for this newfangled music hall to survive would be to show movies along with the stage show. So 2 weeks later, on January 11th, 1933, the first film, The Bitter Tea of General Yen, starring Barbara Stanwyck, opened. And the music hall became the most famous movie palace in the world. They would show movies and stage shows all day long. The movies played 5 times a day. The stage shows were done 4 times a day. And in its heyday, if a movie played the music hall, it was instantly considered a surefire hit. That's the kind of reputation it had. Producers would fight to get their films in there. And when you look at the list of classic films that open there, it is mind-blowing. It had over 100 world premieres at the theater. Just look at these films. Whenever a film changed, the show changed. And for the first 2 years of its existence, the movies only lasted 1 to 2 weeks. I don't know how they did that for 2 years. In all the years I worked there, we had 1 2 weeker, and that was tough. And believe it or not, the first film to break all records and run 5 long weeks was none other than Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And that opened in 1938. Now, by the 1940s, the average run of a film was between 3 to 6 weeks. It all depended, of course, on the success of the film. And the rehearsals would start 2 weeks before the film changed. And we rehearsed between the shows while the movie was playing in the large rehearsal hall up on the 8th floor. This is a shot of a rehearsal. And whenever we had to do stage rehearsals, which was every morning during opening week, they were really early in the morning because the theater always opened with a film, except on Sunday. And the doors would open between 9 and 9:30, depending on the length of the movie. So we had to be off the stage by 9 o'clock. So our calls for these rehearsals were usually at 5:30 in the morning. This is a shot of a dress rehearsal, full dress, makeup, everything. And this was taken at 6:30 in the morning. That's Peter Gennaro standing next to me. He was our choreographer towards the end of the music hall's life. The longest the film ever played when I worked there, way back in 1970, it was Airport. That was a mega hit. It was such a hit that they actually, along the marquee in front of the theater, they put AIRPORT and it flashed. That was the only time they ever did that. That was a mega hit. It ran 12 weeks. It was an Easter show. And we thought we were on a holiday because we didn't have rehearsals for a really long time. We loved it. Now, as I said earlier, I worked at the music hall in the ballet company, and I was there for 12 years. These are some rehearsal shots that were taken of me up on the 8th floor. That's where everything was created. There was a big rehearsal hall up there, and also a smaller one. And sometimes we had to share with the Rockettes or the singers, but everything was created upstairs, and then you would bring it down and set it on the stage. Now, the ballet company was very versatile. We did everything from classical ballet on point to jazz and character numbers. I'm going to tell you that's not going to happen anymore. And then when Peter Gennaro, as I just mentioned, when he came in, we did a lot of musical theater numbers. Peter was wonderful to work with. God, he was a doll. And his choreography was so much fun. And after I was there about 5 years, I was asked to become dance captain. And this is a shot in the ballet office. It was one flight above the dressing room. So you could just throw in a robe and run upstairs and work on payroll or whatever you had to do. But sadly, in 1974, the musical had decided to cut costs, and they eliminated the ballet as a permanent group, and we were all let go. And I thought my world had shattered. I really loved working there. And we all scattered around the city, and we all did shows all over the place. And about 6 months later, Peter Gennaro was getting ready to do his Easter show. He had become resident choreographer and one of the top producers there, senior producers there. And Peter wanted another group of dancers besides just the Rockettes. So the music hall held an audition. And it felt like every dancer in New York showed up, including all of us. And what they did, they hired about half of us back, and then they hired some new people. But we weren't permanent anymore. We worked most of the year, but we were hired like the singers. We were hired per show. The only ones who were permanent anymore were the Rockettes. But when I came back this time was when I met my future husband, Bill. True story. When the ballet was fired, Bill was hired by Peter Gennaro and Will Irwin, the musical director, to be a soloist singer. And then I sauntered back in. And it's just ironic to me that what I thought was going to be the end of my world turned out to be the absolute best part of my world. And Bill and I got to work there together for another 5 years. Talk about magic. You're doing what you love and you're falling in love. It was a magical time in our life. Okay, enough about romance. Here is the fact. with the exception of the Christmas show and the Easter show, because those two shows had a built-in audience. At Christmas time, everybody wanted to come and see the Nativity. They still do. And the live animals, the horses and the donkeys and the sheep, those sheep, and the nasty camels. Oh my God, the camels, they would bite and spit and kick. Oh, they were horrible. At Easter time, everybody wanted to come and see the Easter pageant when we made the cross with the lilies. I don't know if you know this, but that set was designed by Vincent Minnelli. He started his career at Radio City Music Hall. So those two shows had a built-in audience because of the Easter pageant and the Nativity. But the rest of the year, it was the movie that sold the tickets. And as you just saw, the movies used to be top of the line. But somewhere in the mid-70s, the films started to change, and they got a little funky, and then they got downright bad. I'm sure none of you have ever had the pleasure of seeing the film Hennessy. Bad. Or The Black Windmill. Doesn't that sound like an uplifting, fun movie? Or The Bluebird, not the cute one with Shirley Temple. No, not that one. The really horrible one that they talked Elizabeth Taylor into starring in. These movies were terrible. And in the book, I do have some quotes from the reviews. My publisher made me do that because he said, if you just say these movies are bad, it's going to be your opinion. He was right. So we did the research. We found some of the reviews, and it was ugly. It was really ugly. And the music hall, they started to lose money. And Bill and I both remember that there were times when that great big beautiful gold curtain would go up, and there were more of us on stage than in that audience. Look at the size of that audience. And we were all backstage going, what is going on? We knew blockbusters were opening all over the place, but they weren't getting booked at the music hall. And then during the Christmas show of 1977, 78, this happened.
It brought so much glitter and entertainment into the lives of millions of New Yorkers in the depths of the Great Depression. And after all these years, there was a sad announcement about that music hall today.
I am announcing the closing of Radio City Music Hall at the end of the 1978 Easter show on April 12th.
There was no last-minute reprieve this time. Last year, employees took a pay cut to keep Radio City open, but nothing could save it this time.
I've worked my ass off for 5 years to keep this theater open. And we have a number of corporations for which I'm responsible, and I put more time on this corporation than I have all of the others put together. And it's, no one wants to shoot Santa Claus.
One final question. Is there any chance the music hall will stay open?
No.
Charming. Bill and I were at that news conference because by this time, Bill had become captain of the singers. And I'll tell you a short story. The night before this happened, we were all in our dressing rooms during the third break, the movie was playing, and the in-house speaker came on, and it was a stage manager. And he said, all captains and heads of departments are requested to, you are to show up at the vice president's office in 10 minutes. And we're all sitting there going, what's going on? And I met Bill in the hall, and what's going on? And we started to go over to his office, and we're walking across the stage, and we're bumping into the head of the Rockettes and the musical director, and we're all going, what's going on? What's going on? And we go in, and he said, you are all invited to an early morning news conference tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And I'm not going to tell you what it's about. And we all went, what? And he went, that's all I have to say. And we all walked out, and we huddled, and we all were like, what? And so Bill and I decided we would go, and there we stood in this large rehearsal hall with Mr. Wonderful saying that, and we felt like we were punched in the stomach, and we didn't know what to do. And we were in the theater way too early to get ready for the show. We were still doing the Christmas show. And so we went down to my little office, and we just kept saying, how did this happen? How did they let this happen? Now, the newspapers that morning, when we finally saw them, said they were going to either tear it down or they were going to turn it into, are you ready? An amusement park. That's just what we need in the middle of Manhattan, is an amusement park. The whole city's an amusement park. Or they were going to make it into a shopping mall. Gee, we don't have any stores in New York. We really need a shopping mall. And then the best, he was our Manhattan borough president. His name was Andrew Stein. I'm sure you don't know who he is, but it was a headline, and I still have it. And it said, Andrew Stein wants to turn Radio City Music Hall into the American Stock Exchange. Really? We didn't know what to do. We didn't know who to believe, but we were encouraged when our Mayor Koch, said this.
New York City would be the poorer for the loss of the music hall. It is a question of a tourist attraction. It is one of our major tourist attractions, and so obviously if I'm interested in keeping business here and enhancing it, I want to keep as many of those tourist attractions open. If they tore
down that place, they would never build another theater with that fabulous Art Deco design. Wrong, period. It's not going to happen. Or build a theater with the theatrical capabilities built into this one. I'm going to show you, give you some examples of what that stage can do. And please remember, this was built in 1932. That rhymed. The stage, which is 144 feet by 66.5 feet, that's big, was designed by Peter Clark and is divided into 3 elevators. Each elevator can go up and down one at a time, 2 at a time, or all 3. And it's done with hydraulic lifts, just like an aircraft carrier. I love this picture. All 3 elevators are down 2 stories, and they're all different levels. The orchestra pit also goes up and down with hydraulic lifts. There's a turntable, the complete width of the stage. You can see the outline of it in this picture. Now, the turntable can go around and all 3 elevators can go up while it's spinning. Turntable can go around and all 3 elevators can descend. I'm going to show you a very short clip of the turntable in use. This is an 8mm film that my brother took. It's the opening of one of the ballets I did, just so you can see how big it is. And of course, the mighty Wurlitzer, which you heard tonight, which happens to be the world's largest theater organ. And of course, it was designed specifically for the music hall. I always call this picture the organ in its cubbyhole. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but when the organist comes out and sits down, they press a button and the whole console, it's on tracks, and it comes out so that the audience can see the organ and the organist. And when they're done, they press the button, it goes back in and little gold curtains close. And in the book, I do give information about the organ, the size of the pipes and how it's maintained. And I've got to tell you, when they play that magnificent instrument and you are new there and you're in the dressing room, it shakes the rafters. It really throws you. You think an earthquake is happening. After you're there about a week, you become very blasé about the whole thing. But the first week, first couple of days is like, what's happening? What's happening? It's unbelievably powerful. And the pipes go right up the wall, and so you feel it. And there's actually 2 consoles, one on either side of the stage, as you can see in this picture. Now, this is a photograph of the orchestra. Now, the section, the orchestra sitting on the brown section. That's called the band car. And you might be saying, what the heck did she say? I said the band car. Let me explain. Band as in musical band, car as in vehicle. They have the ability, and I told you that the pit goes up and down by hydraulic lifts. They can raise the orchestra to the level of the stage. And while the musicians are playing without missing a beat, pun intended, the band car can move onto the stage. And whenever they did that, the audience went insane, as well they should. And in the book, I do give away the well-guarded, silly secret of how that band car moves. You're not going to believe it. There's a steam curtain. We don't have a picture of it, but it ran parallel to the footlights, and it would shoot up a whole wall of steam. It was so intense that they could project film on it for special effects. This steam curtain was connected to New York City sewer steam system, 1932. Above the steam curtain, a rain curtain. And when it rained on that stage, it rained hard. I've been under the rain curtain, you get wet. That was connected to New York Waterworks. How forward-thinking were these men to put all these special effects in this theater in 1932? It had its own costume department up on the 8th floor. This was right down the hall from the rehearsal studio. Around the corner from this, up a couple of steps, was a complete hat department where they made all the hats, headpieces, and wigs. And in the basement of the theater was a full scenic studio. Everything was self-contained in that building. Now, besides the ballet that you've heard an awful lot about tonight, there were the world famous Rockettes. What would the music hall be without the Rockettes? Rockettes made the music hall famous, and the music hall made the Rockettes famous. There was a chorus of singers. This is a shot of Bill on stage. He used to have a mustacho. I took this from the wings. This was our last Easter show together. There was a staff of 40 ushers, all in formal attire. And when Bill and I worked there, there was a 70-piece symphony orchestra. And we thought all of this was well worth fighting to save. And all I kept saying to Bill in that little office was, we have to do something. What are we going to do? I'm a ballet dancer. I don't know what to do. But we were both very upset, very nervous. And I got really angry. I was so mad at the management of that theater. And I loved the building. I knew every inch of the building, and I thought, they are not going to tear this place down. And I didn't know what to do. And I kept staring at the phone in that office. And I knew NBC was right across the street, NBC building. I said to Bill, I'm going to call NBC. I didn't know what I was going to say to them, but I thought, and I did. And explained who I was. And that phone call led to another phone call, led to another phone call. And within an hour, I was booked to appear on a local TV show for the next morning, as long as I brought some Rockettes with me, the Bill Boggs Show.
We have Rosemary Novellino here. Yes. Rosemary, where are you? She is a dance captain for the ballet. A welcome, please, for Rosemary Novellino. Where did you study, Rosemary?
Most of my studying was in New Jersey with Irene Vokine, and then I also studied in the city with several major schools.
You've been dancing since you were how old?
3.5 years old.
What would you like to see happen to Radio City Music Hall now?
I would like to see Radio City remain as it is, if at all possible. I mean, it is known nationwide. It is known all
Also
over the
as a
world.
piece of art and architecture,
Definitely.
as a symbol of architecture of the early
it's one
30s
of-
and Art
right.
Deco. There's almost nothing else like it.
That's
There is
right.
He
nothing
was
else like it.
so annoying. Oh my gosh. All he wanted to do was flirt with those Rockettes behind me. I was standing off camera while he was interviewing them, and I was getting madder by the minute. Steam was shooting out of my ears. And when I finally got up there with him, I was very serious. I had a mission. And I wasn't going to play with him, and he wanted me off of that camera as fast as he could. That was annoying. Anyway, whatever. When we went back to the theater, I said to Bill, we have to do something now. This was the day after the announcement. We were still doing the Christmas show. So Bill and I called a meeting of all the employees after the first show up in the large rehearsal hall. And we got out of our costumes and we ran up there as fast as we could. And we were the first ones up there. Large rehearsal hall, ballet bar across the mirror. And we were leaning against the bar, reading an article in the New York Times about this situation. And the door opened. And the door to the rehearsal had a distinctive squeak. And I didn't turn around. I just looked in the mirror to see who was coming in. And the first two people to walk through that door, it wasn't a Rockette, a singer or a ballet dancer. It was two men, a stagehand and a musician. And I looked at Bill and I said, this is serious. And within 15 minutes, there were about 200 people staring at me. And I do not remember the speech I gave. I only remember how I started it. I looked up at everybody and everybody had a desperate look in their eye. And I said to them, we have nothing to lose. We are going to be out of here as of April 12th. So why not fight to save this building? And so it began right there. We quickly became organized and we formed a committee and we called ourselves the Show People's Committee to Save Radio City Music Hall. And the committee elected me the president. This was our poster. One of the musicians' wives was an illustrator and she did this snappy poster for us and we collected money from everyone, printed it up, and we plastered New York City with it. Whenever anybody went home for their vacation or a week off or whatever, we gave them a poster. And soon this poster was everywhere. We wrote letters to everyone. We wrote to movie stars and Broadway stars and politicians and community leaders. We wrote to TV shows and newspapers across the country. Remember, this was way before email or Facebook was even a dream in anyone's head. The only social media we had needed a stamp. We created a petition and we went out between the shows while the movie was running and asked the people on the line to sign the petition. The minute this was announced, the lines were around the block like the good old days. I took this picture hanging out of the third floor ballet dressing room because we couldn't believe there were lines around the block. So we had a schedule, we had our clipboards, and every single day between every single show, unless we had a rehearsal, there were at least 4 or 5 employees or cast members out there asking people to sign the petitions. Now, the female performers, we went out in our full makeup. We didn't take that off 4 times a day. We would have no skin. The makeup for the musical is a little intense. We wore street clothes, but we had the eyelashes out to here and everything. And I mean, I'm not stupid. I know that the people on the line got a kick out of meeting us. I get that. If I went to a show tomorrow and I met somebody in the show before I saw it, it would be more fun. I get that. But those people had no idea what they were doing for our morale, because the morale inside that theater was horrible. We had help from a lot of people. Nobody, I'm going to repeat that word, nobody does this by themselves. The Hilton Hotel, which is 2 blocks away from the music hall on 53rd and 6th, 3 blocks, okay, gave us a ground floor office for free for 3 months. They didn't want it to close either. This is a shot of Bill in that office when we got the prototype of the sign. Now, this office also had something we don't think about too much anymore, something called long distance. I was calling everywhere. I was calling you guys in California, and the Hilton never charged us 1 single penny. We got a letter from a Dr. Joseph Rosenberg. He had seen our poster. And when I read the letter, it stated that he had been involved in helping to save Grand Central. And I went, oh, we have to talk to this man. And the committee said, yes, Rosie, you have to call him. And I will make a confession. I was completely intimidated. I kept staring at his title, Dr. Joseph Rosenberg. It's going to get a call from Rosie Novellino, ballet dancer. Oh yeah, this is gonna go well. But he put his phone number was on the letter. So I stared at that phone and called him on that phone. Maybe that's who I'm talking to when they took that picture. I don't know. And I dialed it and he answered on the first ring. I will never forget that. And one of the sweetest, nicest men besides my darling Bill answered the phone. Oh my God, he was so nice and patient. He let me ask him all kinds of questions. And then I asked him a really biggie. I said, would you mind coming in and helping us out, giving us advice about landmarking, because we had started that process. And you know what he said to me, a total stranger? He said, tell me where and when, and I'll be there. This is a picture of dear sweet Joe Rosenberg. And if he hadn't come in to tell us what he told us, I don't know if the musical would still be there. And Joe also did the forward for my book. And I do call him Joe because Joe and his wife, Norma, and Bill and I are still 40 some years later, extremely close friends. I love you, Joe Rosenberg. I did other TV shows and radio shows, local stuff around the city. I don't know if you've ever, besides the Bill Boggs thing, I don't know if you've ever heard of Joe Franklin. I don't know if he was syndicated out there in New York, but he really was enthusiastic about helping us. He loved the music hall. And I did his show with the dance captain of the Rockettes, and Joyce Dwyer, and we had a wonderful time on his show. He was charming. And then right after that, he called me at home and he asked me if I would do his radio show the following Saturday. So of course I said yes. And Bill and I went over there, and the radio show was completely different. The TV show was all, we got our point across, but it was all light and fluffy and silly and fun. The radio show was hard hitting. He asked direct questions about, you know, the music hall and the Rockefellers and all this stuff. It was a great interview. So I will always be extremely grateful to Joe Franklin for his help. And I was on the radio a lot on WCBS radio with a man by the name of Art Athens. I think you would have had to have been here to know who he was, but he was a big deal on WCBS radio. And Art was amazing. There's a lot in the book about Art and Joe Rosenberg. I always say that Art Athens and Joe Rosenberg were 2 angels that flew down and landed in front of us. They were friends, confidants, coaches. They told us what to do in the area of their expertise. And who knew? We didn't know what they told us. We couldn't have done it without them. And then we got invited to fly out to California to do, remember Tom Snyder's Tomorrow Show? Well, we were to the moon when we got this invitation. And I was going to do this with Ron Hokoff. Ron was another very strong member of our committee and a singer with Bill. And then Ron and I went into complete panic. We talked about this all the way out on the plane. We were so nervous because we felt like we had the responsibility of 400 people on our shoulders, because this was going to be our first national TV appearance.
We have with us tonight two members of the Show People's Committee to Save Radio City Music Hall, and they will detail their efforts for us tonight on how they're going. You two are facing some very, very stiff competition. You have the Rockefeller Center people who say that it's been losing money for a long, long time. You have the motion picture people who say they can't supply the kinds of product that is necessary to keep that place going with family trade. How do you buck that kind of competition against you?
Well, I think if we can make everybody realize how important the music hall is. It's an institution. It's the only one of its kind in this country. And I feel, and the committee feels, that the music hall is, as I said before, an institution. The Rockettes are an art form. It's an American art form. And we've been chopping away at so many things in this country, and especially in New York, which I love. But if we keep chopping, there's not going to be anything left. And, well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think it's a crime. If they let the music hall close, it is over. It is gone. They will not build another Radio City Music Hall. There will not be another line called the Rockettes. They own the name. And so many people have grown up going to music hall. I did. I went there as a child. My parents took me. That was the first time I saw live entertainment.
We have Rockettes and ballet girls down in blizzards with petitions. How many signatures do we have now?
We have over 70,000 signatures on petitions.
And that's petitions for what?
To keep the music hall open.
And who do they go to?
We are bringing them to the landmark hearing.
Mm-hmm. Well, the landmark hearing is coming up in March.
March 14th.
March 14th. We shall report back. I hope that this has helped get the word out. And for
so.
all those people who do not live in New York, who have been to that city and have been to the music hall and know what it is, now you know what's going to happen if somebody doesn't do something. Thanks for making the trek out. I hope it turns out to have been well worth your while.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you.
He was
Ron.
fabulous. He was just fabulous. I mean, that's just a clip. He gave us the whole show, and he completely calmed us down during the first commercial. He was great. And some very important things, good things, interesting things happened after that show. And just before Ron and I went out there, it had become very clear to us that Rockefeller Center was vehemently against saving the music hall. We caused publicity stunts constantly to keep our fight on the news and in the minds of the public. We very quickly realized that if the public kept seeing us, then our issue would not be forgotten. I really didn't want to become yesterday's news. And this was one of our better efforts at getting news media attention.
Thanks for signing our petition. We're not giving up our fight. That's why we have suits of armor on.
Rockettes and other performers took to the sidewalk to collect signatures from the weekend crowds waiting to get in. They did this between performances, and they collected quite a few names.
Today, the performers who work inside the music hall were outside, in costume, getting signatures on petitions.
We're the Show People's Committee to Save Music Hall, and we think it's a shame if they close this great place. It's an American institution. Why close it?
We are not giving up the fight to save Radio City Music Hall, even though it is going to close on April 12th. We're still going to be in there fighting. We still want people to write and sign the petition, and let's keep this place open.
Hoping that some 11th hour miracle will stop the closing, the workers had a lot of support from their public.
Do you think that's important, ma'am?
Well, I certainly do. I think it's a disgrace. This place is a landmark. I've been here since I was a little girl. I think it's terrible.
The performers hope to pressure the state and federal government for additional support to keep the music hall operating.
This stunt, this really made the music hall mad at us. Oh my God, they were furious. If you ever read the book, you'll find out why they were so mad. You will also find out why we were wearing armor. You just might be surprised. Now, some of the politicians were completely against what we were trying to do. I guess it all depended on which way the political wind was blowing. That hasn't changed. As a matter of fact, our dear sweet mayor, who we thought was on our side, completely changed his tune.
I am not in a position to compel a businessman to stay open and lose $3 million a year.
I am not defending him by any means. I was not a fan, but we found out many years later that he was getting a lot of pressure from the Rockefellers to not support saving the music hall. This is exactly what we were up against. Every time we thought we had made a positive move forward in the right direction, someone of importance would come along and try to push us right back down where they thought we belonged. And I would have none of it. Marianne Krupczak, she was the lieutenant governor at the time under Governor Hugh Carey, and his term was just about over. Well, she started to pay attention to us after we did a few of these TV appearances. And, you know, because of all the publicity we were causing and the theatrical nature of our issue, the press gave us a lot of attention. We were on the news a lot. And Marianne Krupczak attached herself to our bandwagon. She contacted us, and she soon became our political champion in the fight to save the music hall. We unfortunately needed a politician on our side. We were fighting politicians. Now, there were many celebrities that offered to help us. And the first one was Chita Rivera. And she came over one afternoon and stood outside with Bill and all the male singers and sang, "You Gotta Have Heart" from, no, not that Bob Viper, Damn Yankees. Bill changed the lyrics around so it fit our situation. And we got all the male singers to stand around Chita, and she stood under the marquee and they sang their hearts out. It was great. We really appreciated that she did that. Phyllis Diller wrote us a beautiful letter from California and stated that she would lend her name to anything we needed it for to save that magnificent theater. Beautiful letter from a beautiful woman. We did use her name. The Oscar-winning actor Cliff Robertson, oh my God, what a nice guy he was. Oh, and funny and enthusiastic. He would do anything we asked him to do. He even tried to sing once, which he couldn't do very well. What a nice guy. His wife, the actress Dina Merrill, she was not happy that he was involved with us, not at all. He didn't care. He just kept coming over and helping us out. He was just wonderful. But the star that helped us the most was the beautiful movie star Arlene Dahl. Now, Bill and I were invited to her apartment to discuss what she could do for us. And we were trying to stay very calm and sophisticated, of course. And we rang the doorbell. And this is what opened the door, this gorgeous, I mean, it was really movie star time. I thought I was being very sophisticated, but I almost lost my breath. She was so gorgeous. I don't know what poor Bill was going through. But, and she ushered us in, and she couldn't have been nicer. Oh my God, she was so charming. She was charming. She was smart. She just made us feel like we were long lost friends. And because of her connections and her efforts and her brains, she got me booked to appear on Good Morning America for the very morning of the landmark hearing. That was her idea. And right after I was booked, ABC called me at home and said, "Do you think you can get Marianne Krupczak to be on this show with you?" And I didn't say this to them, but my mindset was, she's a politician. Why wouldn't she want to be on television? So of course I called Marianne, and of course she said yes. And so on March 14th at 8 o'clock in the morning, Marianne Krupczak and I appeared outside under the marquee for Good Morning America. right after this, right after this, we literally went across the street down into the subway hole because we had to go to the landmark hearing. I think that was going to be at 9 or 9:30. Now, this was another stunt that we pulled. About a week or so before the landmark hearing, we were brainstorming, what are we going to do to get publicity for ourselves at this hearing? Because we knew a lot of people were coming. And then my brain exploded and I went, oh, we'll get the Rockettes to do an impromptu kick line on the steps of City Hall. The press will come running over. So I went across to the Rockette side. The ballet dressing rooms were on the 50th Street side of the building. The Rockettes lived on 51st. So I ran across the stage and went up to the dressing room and I explained, guys, you got to do this, right? Of course they said yes, because we're all on the same page to save the theater. Great. Then Bill and I went up to the costume department and we asked Penny and Leanne, the two women that ran the costume shop, can you make sashes a la Miss America and put Rockette on it so that they can wear that over their street clothes? Yes, great, fabulous. Now we're doing the Easter show. And I remember I got into my Easter pageant costume and I flew down to the musicians' quarters and I said, please, guys, would some of you please come and play on the steps so that the Rockettes have some music? And of course they said yes. And so this was our impromptu kick line on the steps of City Hall.
This could be one of the Rockettes' last performances. It was choreographed to precision. On this bleak March morning on the steps of City Hall, they helped launch one of the most intensive lobbying efforts the City Landmarks Commission has ever seen, the fight to save Radio City Music Hall.
When we got inside, Alton Marshall was one of the first to speak.
Hundreds of people want to save Radio City. Before the Landmarks Commission, they were arguing that the music hall be made a landmark. That would put legal hurdles in the way of any sale or change. Legal hurdles that Rockefeller Center's president says is just what the music hall doesn't need.
Landmark designation will bring about another negative accomplishment. It will leave me no choice but to apply for a permit to demolish the structure the day after such designation goes into effect, so that at the end of 305 days, I will be free to act.
That still riles me every time I see it, and I've seen it a lot. We don't like him. I spoke about an hour after him, and after I gave my speech was when we presented the petitions. Bill and one of the male dancers presented them quite dramatically. And at this point, we had over 150,000 handwritten signatures, not like today where you can do it on a computer. They were handwritten, 150,000 from all over the world. And these signatures had a major effect on the hearing. That was March 14th. On March 28th, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks, I got a phone call in the ballet dressing room. And it was Joe Rosenberg and Art Athens yelling into the same receiver because they wanted me to be the first to know, God bless them, that the Landmark Commission had designated the interior of the music hall a city landmark. Now, that little red circle is probably too small, so Bill's going to blow it up for you because it says, Mayor Koch is delighted. Oh, come on, make up your mind. Anyway, this city landmark would give the theater a 361-day reprieve. They couldn't touch it for almost a year, and they would have a year to figure out how to make it viable again. And our next step was to have it designated, can't talk anymore, designated a National Historic Landmark. But the doors were still going to close on April 12th. So we continued doing publicity stunts whenever we could to keep it in the public view. The landmarking alone was not going to keep the doors open, and we desperately wanted to make sure it did not close and it remained an active landmark theater. And now that horrible day, the closing day of April 12th, 1978, was here. And I will tell you honestly, it was one of the hardest days for Bill and me to get through in our lifetime together. The morning started with all of us in our own apartments watching NBC's Today Show, because they did the second hour from 8 to 9 on the stage of the music hall.
Our live NBC News minicam this morning is inside Radio City Music Hall here at Rockefeller Center. You may never see these scenes again, because this is the day that is the scheduled closing of Radio City Music Hall by Rockefeller Center, Inc.
This Today Show, it was a fiasco. It started off all sweet and charming with two Rockettes on stage with Gene Shalit. Remember Gene Shalit with all his hair and his mustache? I will introduce the two Rockettes. The blonde Rockette is Carol Harbick, and the brunette is Joyce Twyer, and Joyce was the one I did the Joe Franklin show with. This was charming, it was cute, it was funny, it was great. And then it turned into a political war live on television. We could not believe what we were watching. Bill and I were in our own apartments. We were watching it together over the telephone. And all we could say to each other was, we are doomed. That's how our day started. And everybody went to work. And everybody was depressed because of this Today Show. We were depressed anyway. And we tried to get through the day. It was on television all day long. That's how big a deal it was here. And now it was time to do that last show. And the musical had done a good thing, believe it or not. They had decided to make the last show a charity benefit for the Variety Club Foundation of New York. It was a charity for children. That's very nice. The whole audience was invited. And then they did a bad thing. To start this benefit, they hired Stanley Siegel, who was a TV personality at the time, to MC the beginning of the show. And the show started with this fabulous black and white newsreel film of the opening night of the music hall and the beginning of the Rockettes. We're all craning our necks and the wings trying to see this thing because we had never seen it before, and I haven't seen it since. It was fabulous. And Stanley Siegel is standing out there on the stage, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He did not do his homework. He didn't know what he was talking about. And we are all standing there, and we were incensed by him. And when the show, finished him, the show started, we were doing the Easter show. For any of you who have never seen the Easter pageant, it's very solemn. It's heavy classical music. The singing is operatic. It's religious in nature. We make a cross at the end with lilies. And the minute the curtain went up on this very serious thing, all we heard on stage was, "Don't close, don't go." Ugh. It was brutal. None of us looked at each other on stage. Nobody made eye contact because we knew we would burst into tears if we did, and we had to stay in whatever character we were in. It was horrible. And to say it was a little tense backstage is to put it mildly. The tension wasn't bouncing off the walls. It was crashing against the walls. People were fighting and bickering and crying. It was horrible back there. You couldn't even breathe. I never want to go through another thing like that in my life. And the poor Rockettes, it's very rare that I say poor Rockettes. The number that they did for that Easter show ended on the passerelle. If you don't know what a passerelle is, I'll explain it. No reason you should. It's an extension of the stage that comes out around the outside of the orchestra pit. And when you're on the passerelle, I was on it many times, you are really close to the audience. You are touching close to the audience. And when the women finished, 6,000 people jumped to their feet, screaming bravo, throwing flowers at them. And as the flowers were cascading over the head, the tears were streaming down their faces.
You might be the last people to see this show the way it is.
The capacity crowd of 6,000 seemed unwilling to accept that this show could be the last for the music hall and for the Rockettes and the singers and stagehands and costumers. The crowd cheered and applauded throughout the performance, and even as spectators stood for a final ovation, late negotiations continued between the state and city and Rockefeller Center, the owner of the music hall, whose managers insisted the landmark had to be closed because of multi-million-dollar losses.
Now, this was actually the finale of that show. And at this point, the theater was 46 years old, and they had never done curtain calls. It just wasn't done at the music hall. But thanks to our stage managers, Frank Hawkins and George Court, they made this last for us for a full 10 minutes.
I don't know, that's still hard for me to watch. When the curtain came down, we still had no idea of the outcome. But we had decided to go out in style, and we were going to have a party across the street at the Rainbow Room. We couldn't afford the real big fancy room, but the one right under it, it was called the Rainbow Grill. They gave us a deal, and we were going to get all dressed up and have this party, and it was either going to be a celebration or a wake. We had no idea. But during that last show, when I was backstage, the head stage manager, Frank Hawkins, he came over to me and handed me a piece of paper. He said, "Rosie, take this. You may need this tonight." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "It's John Jackson's phone number." And John Jackson was the senior vice president. I had no idea why Frank was giving me that, but I stuck it in my costume somewhere. And then when I got all glammed up for the party, I didn't put it in my bag. I folded it and stuck it in the bosom of my gown. And Bill and I went to the party. And at exactly 11:50, 10 minutes to midnight, our assistant stage manager was at the party and came running over to me and go, Steve Keller was his name. Rosie, he was hysterical. You have to call John Jackson. You have to call him right now." And so since Steve was hysterical, I got hysterical. I said, okay. And I didn't know where to go for a telephone. We didn't have cell phones in 1978. So I went to a gentleman in a tuxedo from the Rainbow Room. He said, "Do you have a phone I could use?" And he escorted me to the hall to a wooden phone booth. And I sat down and I ran out of the party so fast, I didn't bring my bag. And I looked at this man and I went, "I don't have any money." And he went in his pocket and he handed me a dime. And I made the call and I flew back into the party to make this announcement.
My name is Rosemary Novellino.
What did you find out?
I called the Vice President's office, John Jackson. I spoke to Music Hall's attorney, Alan Jaffe. He said, "Tell everyone we're in business to report to work tomorrow. Music Hall has been saved." I ran to the phone and called one of our vice presidents, John Jackson. He spoke to me briefly for a second and put me on the phone with Music Hall's attorney, Alan Jaffe. And Alan Jaffe said, "Tell everyone the music hall has been saved and to report to work tomorrow." And I said, "Thank you." And I got off the phone and ran back in here. It's just, I can't believe it.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, this major David and Goliath accomplishment was all done in 3 months. But that's not the end of the story. The end is a bit bittersweet. Thank you for listening. And we have a great website, savingradiocitymusical.com, where you can find out a whole lot more. I really appreciate your attention. I hope you found this interesting. We'd love to answer some questions for you. There you are, you're back.
Yes, that is, I love that story. I got tears in my eyes.
I'm crying too.
Thank you. That's very nice. I get very choked up too sometimes, especially when I see that last show. It's been 40 something years, 42 years or something, and I'm still, it all comes flooding back. It all comes flooding back, all those emotions. And even when we were there last night, we were just looking at each other going, we did this. And we got a little verklempt. So
this was great. It was great. I saw it once before, and it was just great seeing it again.
Thank you.
Who's got some questions for Rosemary? Joseph Guerdera, no one has a question here? Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Bill Gore, go ahead.
Hey, I'm going to turn around so you can see Bill too.
I'll move it.
Yeah. All right, there we go.
Well,
Okay.
to start with, I took my 2 very little boys. They must have been about 7 and 10, and we went to see a movie, and there must have been 3 or 5 other people in the entire music hall.
Oh God, do you remember the movie?
No, but we went and sat second row center for the orchestra. It was fabulous. We had the whole stage show for ourselves.
So you probably came there at the end when everything was a mess. Yeah. I mean, when they weren't doing well.
It wasn't 7. Yeah, it was. And then we moved back for the movie because you didn't want to sit there.
Right.
And
Right.
I think my younger son must have picked out that he wanted to play trumpet from that experience.
Really? Did he end up becoming a trumpet player?
Very seriously, except now he just designs high-end audio.
Wow, I'm impressed.
But
How do you like that? That's cool.
Yeah, he knew his instruments, and he must have picked out from that one experience that he really liked the trumpet.
Well, if you were sitting that close, you were very close to the trumpet players. Yes, indeed. So you saw the orchestra come up, just like I described, right? Yeah.
Right. Must have been at most 10 people in the entire place.
See, that's,
But
we were.
It was glorious. We had everything for ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. There is a benefit for you when that happens. Yeah,
Right.
that was really depressing when that happened. You can imagine being on that stage, looking out and seeing it empty when we were so used to seeing it packed. It was just like.
But everyone performed as if it was packed. It was amazing. Absolutely
that's great.
amazing.
That's great. It's nice to hear that. I will tell some of my friends who said that.
Right.
I hope it did influence him. I know when I first worked, I was studying ballet as a little tiny kid, and I was a little tiny kid the first time I went to the music hall, and that was the first time I saw live ballet, and I thought, ooh, wow, I'd like to do that, and the dream came true many years later. But it has influenced a lot of people. As I said on Stupid Bill Boggs show, that the music hall is known all over the world. When we have been in Europe and people ask, what did you do? And I said, well, we used to, and we say Radio City Musical. Oh, Viva Radio City Musical. Everybody knows about Radio City Musical. It really is the most famous theater in the world, I think. There were the Metropolitan Opera is famous, the Paris Opera House. Those things are famous, but the music hall has a connection with the everyman.
And it's gorgeous. It
would have been a shame. It is gorgeous. if you love Art Deco, I mean, wow. And that, somebody asked me once when I was doing this live, did the music hall get run down when all this was happening? And I said, no, they kept it up. They kept it clean. They kept it spotless. They painted it. It never looked, did it look bad when you were there? It looked nice, right?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
But
They kept it up.
But it was a concern that it was empty.
Yes. And well, see,
huge stage show, but you wouldn't have known if the performance was as if it was a full theater. It's amazing, right?
Maybe they went to see the Bluebird.
Maybe.
Could be.
Bluebird or Hennessy or one of those horrible things. It was, she's not exaggerating. It was that empty. It really was. It was so depressing. It was horrible.
Question about the designation. Wasn't there, if I read in one of the emails, that they had to get a certain designation landmark for the city, but then they had to do a national one? Two different designations?
Yeah, we did the city landmarking first. And what the city landmark does, it's a Band-Aid. It gave the theater a 361, not 365, 361 day reprieve, so that Mr. Monster there with the glasses couldn't touch it for a year. And then you start working to turn it into a national historic landmark. But it was made a national, wait, I have the exact date here because I don't.
When you made that announcement, was that the city landmark or was that the national one that you made the announcement?
That was the city, the one that was in the paper. Yeah, that was the city. Yeah, the national landmark happened in May. So that wasn't that long after. April, May was the next month.
No, that's great.
It would have been a shame after the Roxy Theater got closed.
Yes.
And torn down.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen pictures of the Roxy. The Roxy was very, it looked like an opera house, a European opera house. It was
My mom
gorgeous.
skated there. She chipped the last.
Get
piece of ice.
out! Your mother was an ice skater, really?
Roller skater.
Oh, that's so cool. Roller skater.
You know my dad, Bill Walker.
Bill Walker from the music hall?
Yeah.
Bill Walker, he was head electrician.
Yeah.
You're his daughter?
I am.
Oh my God, how nice to meet you. Sure, your dad was there when we were doing all this.
And I was there in the 80s.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that your mother was a skater. No, yes, we knew Bill very well. We knew Bill very well.
And I worked there for 8 years myself. You were probably still there in the 80s or no?
No. After it was saved, I'll give away the ending. Rosie and Bill were blackballed and we never worked there again. So that was our last show. What did you do there?
I was the manager of house operations. I worked with FB and Anthony and.
Wow.
So yes,
That's
everybody
cool.
kept the place up and it looked wonderful and.
Yeah, then you knew, who did we see last night? Bruce. What's Bruce's last name? Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. He's a friend of ours. We saw him last night at the opening, Bruce Michaels.
Yes.
Yes, Bruce. Yeah. He was stage manager, and then he ended up working with the Rockette, the traveling Rockettes.
Family friend Linda Lamack.
Yes, I knew Linda extremely well. Yeah. We had a little bit of we had a serious falling out. You have to read the book to find out. Linda's in the book. But yes, I knew Linda very well. We started there together. We sat right next to each other in the dressing room in 1966, 67, something like that. Yeah. And her husband worked for your husband, John Lee Mack.
Yep.
Yeah. He was head electrician. Oh, Bill Walker, my God, this is great. I love this. I love this. So you knew about all this stuff. You heard about this. You were around when all this was going on.
I mean, yeah, I grew up there because he started working there before I was born. And so I grew up there and then I ended up working there for 8 years.
See, look at that. Look at that. So many families.
My husband worked there too. He was a stagehand.
Really? Wow, I love that. Then you guys, he knows all about the stage and how it works, everything that goes up and down and around and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and it's still doing it. It's still
And you're
there.
right about the camels.
Oh,
She's right about
weren't
the
they
camels.
obnoxious? Ugh.
And you'd find sheep in the elevators. It was so much fun.
The sheep. The sheep. I'll tell you, the name of my book was going to be Manure on My Mark, and my publisher made me change it because the ballet always followed the nativity. In the good old days, the nativity was the beginning of the show. Now it's the end of the show. It should go back to the beginning of the show, I think. But anyway.
It was greater then anyway.
It was more powerful when it started the show.
Yeah.
And so they would march all these animals, they're still marching them across, the animals across, and the sheep would go across, and the sheep would leave little M&Ms all over the stage. And then it was time for the ballet to come out. And there we were trying to avoid putting our point shoe into some sheep stuff. And I thought manure on my mark, because you remember the marks on the stage, there were marks. So for every step you did, you hit an A or an X or a B or an O and all these things. And there was always a piece of sheep stuff on your mark. And I was also allergic to all those animals. Oh, geez. And they live there. There's an animal room, you know that. Animal room. All those animals live there. And they're dander just.
If you go in the coffee shop in the morning to eat, you'd see them walking up and down the street as you're eating.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the dander would build, and it got so I was in those days, all you had was Dristan. They didn't have the stuff they have now. And I actually sneezed on stage. It was so bad. I thought. So you knew Frank Hawkins and George Court. Oh God. Yeah. They were just wonderful people. George was a very
Leonidoff. He used to give me 50-cent pieces when I visited.
Really? He was a maniac. He was a complete maniac. He did some really spectacular things, but the man was out of his ever-loving mind. Oh my God. But an interesting, Bill never worked with him. Leonidoff had already retired by the time Bill came on the scene, but he heard lots of stories about Leonidoff. But
just to show how much everybody loved the place, to this day, there's a Facebook page that's called Former Employees of Radio City Music Hall.
Yeah, I know, I'm a part of it.
People on there from over the years that just constantly are sharing memories and information, and it's really fun.
Yeah, I'm part of that too. I'm on that, yeah. And last night we saw a lot of old friends because we were invited by the Rock, though I wasn't a Rockette, but because of what Bill and I did, they're some of the few people that have said thank you to us. And they always invite us to the opening, and that's really sweet. And we saw so many people last night that we hadn't seen in a long time.
Nice.
And Bruce Michaels was there last night, so that was fun.
So yes, oh God, yeah, we know. Much.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for watching. And it's the rest of you are probably bored with us right now, but I am just thrilled that she is Bill Walker's son, because he was a really nice guy and he really knew what he was doing. And he was one of the ones there that you respected. I'm not just saying that because you're his daughter. There were some people there I wanted to smack, but he was one of the good ones. Yeah. No.
Being a New Yorker, I was 7 years old in 1953. My girlfriend's mother took us into the city, and you can imagine what a 7-year-old is seeing there, falling in love with the dancers and the scenery, and it's magical, and it makes you fall in love with the theater and all of Broadway. I mean, it's theater. And then my parents would take us, we would drive in from Long Island, go to Jamaica, get on the subway, go to the station, get out underneath at Radio City.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Center. Then up from the subway, then you had to cross the street, and we would stand in line, freezing, to get the tickets to the Christmas show. And then to see that those Wurlitzers turn around, and they're coming down from the side stages, and they're the actors, the performers, and to watch. I know you were trying to show us how the stage has all these levels that go up and down and turn around. So by the 60s, when I was dating my former husband, I would go to the show all the time. And for the price of just a little bit more than a movie ticket, you can see
It was
show.
the buy of New York.
It was the buy of New York. And I
It
used
was
to
the buy of New York.
cheat. I have to say I used to cheat because I would buy my ticket and I would go up to the first balcony so you had a good view of the movie and you had a good view of the show, and then you're supposed to leave. But I would sneak down to the mezzanine and I would always go to lower right side, and the drummer knew me by my face and I would just watch it up close. And I was just fascinating. I mean, I was so close I could see the little hole in the mesh stockings of the dancers. I sat there and it was like fascinating. It was just, yes, it's some more. So I was crying today. Thank you very much for being on. And
thank you for saying that.
That's
We must be
and
around
you know
the
what?
same age, because I was going there as a little kid too, because I grew up in New Jersey and my parents took me in, and all that stuff you just said, I felt the same way. It was so big and so lavish, and the orchestra coming up and the thing and the coming down the choral staircase. And I mean, never in my lifetime would I think I was going to end up work there, let alone try to save the building. So I know exactly what you mean. It was a special place to go. And when you know, Easter show and the Christmas show, and we'd go out for dinner, and then we'd go see the show, and it was just great. Go to St. Patrick's for mass, and it was a whole thing, you know.
Even going to the ladies' room in the powder room and sitting there in front of those individual mirrors
bathroom.
with your little seats, you felt like a little princess. You felt like a little queen sitting there in these fabulous lounges, because they had a lounge with separate from the, you know, where they had the toilets and stuff.
Yes.
I always compared, I went to Bullock's Wilshire. Every time I go to Bullock's Wilshire at Marshall Field, I always compare their ladies' rooms to Radio City.
I love that. I love that. We have to have a cup of coffee or drink sometime if I'm ever in California. I know exactly what you mean. That's a wonderful, I love to hear these memories from people, because I had those memories as a kid. And I remember going there in the late 50s, early 60s, a lot of Doris Day movies. I saw all the Doris Day movies there. She seemed to be there for every Easter show or Christmas show that my parents took me to. But yeah, fabulous, just fabulous. And the lines, my father used to try to bribe the ushers to let us in, you know. Sometimes it worked, most of the time it didn't work.
They didn't have these ticket sales like they do nowadays. So you had to wait line, you had to wait in the cold of December going around the block.
That's right. And it did go around the block.
I was lucky because I walked around the block and went in the stage door.
Yeah, well, you were
cheated.
spoiled. You were spoiled. But you know what you said, you could go in there. It's not like today where everything's reserved seats. The only thing that was reserved was the first mezzanine. You could go in there in the morning and stay there all day. You could stay and see the movie again and the stage show again, and nobody cared. You could just stay there. We would go
around when I could have done it. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I did do it once. I think my parents let me stay for another show because I loved it so much.
Us too. We would go in and see the show first, and then the movie, and then we say, "Can we stay and see the show again?" And my father, "Sure, what the heck?" Yeah.
And then I always insisted on going to Horn and Harder afterwards.
Yes, right down the street on 50th Street.
Right.
It's on 50th.
Unfortunately, Rosie, I wanted to be a ballet dancer, but unlike you, that didn't happen. But yes, we all wanted to be ballet dancers.
Did you study?
I studied, and then my parents stopped my lessons.
Oh, too bad.
Well,
Too bad.
Good question.
Hey, Rosemary.
Rosemary?
Peter has a question.
Yes. Rosemary. Yeah, I was born in New York City in 1935, and I don't think you mentioned the name Jesse Crawford. He was a big part of the show in those days. The organist.
Jesse Crawford was an organist, right?
Yes.
And I also wanted to know, how did they turn it around financially in order to perpetuate the business?
You mean now?
Well, yes.
After it was saved, or
after it was saved, yes.
After it was saved, it was totally taken over by different management. And they turned it into, now the music hall, they don't show movies anymore.
Oh.
And we're getting a little bit of feedback here, but it's a concert hall. They do the Christmas show, and now the Christmas show is just a show. It's longer than the ones we used to do. Our shows were between a half hour and 45 minutes because they had to stick it in between the movie. Now it's just the show. So the show is about an hour and a half. Those Rockettes are working their tails off. They do like 8 numbers, and I'm not exaggerating. And so they make a lot of money at Christmas with the Christmas show, except for last year. Nobody made any money last year. And then the rest of the year, it's a concert hall. I mean, Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett were just there about a month ago. So they do concerts, they do rock concerts, they rent it out for, they do the Tony Awards there. They used to do the Tony Awards there.
Night of 100 Stars. They did.
Yes, I don't know anything about football, but there's some kind of football. What is that thing called? Where they
the draft.
Yeah, the draft. They rent it to them. So they make a lot of money on that. Just the Tony Awards alone. I mean, you guys are in LA, you know how long it takes to get the Oscars ready. The Tony Awards, they're there for weeks and weeks and weeks before the actual award. So they're renting the building the whole time. So that's what they do. And it's very successful.
Yes,
Very
MTV.
successful.
Yeah.
It's
Thanks so
run
much
by
for the
Madison
story.
Square. Now Madison Square Garden runs it.
Oh.
I'm not saying that's good, but it's successful. It's successful.
Okay, thanks so much. It was a very interesting, and I was not aware of all this. I moved to the West Coast in the 50s. So very interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And I love hearing from a real New Yorker. All of you have New York roots. You all deserted us and went out there to sun.
I'm here.
Los Angeles,
I'm on Long Island.
Los Angeles is one of the few cities where being from New York is not considered a negative.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right.
I have a quick question. About this time, wasn't there a move to save Carnegie Hall?
Carnegie Hall was saved before us. That was the first one, and their ringleader was Isaac Stern.
Yeah. Okay.
Violinist.
Did you learn
Yeah.
anything from them?
A little bit. That was saved, and then Grand Central was saved. And then we were the third one. And Jackie Onassis was very involved. She was the ringleader for the Grand Central, but she would have nothing to do with us. We tried, nothing. And I think it was because the Rockefellers were Republicans and the Kennedys were Democrats. And I think it boiled down to that. And also, I also think she thought the music hall might be a little beneath her. Grand Central Station or Terminal is much more elegant than Radio City Music Hall. She wouldn't talk to us. We tried. So doesn't matter. We did it without her.
Yeah, you did it.
Yeah,
You did.
yeah.
You certainly did. Who else has questions for this lovely lady here? No?
You know, one other thing that happened when we finished, that's when they were going to demolish a bunch of Broadway houses because they were going to put the Marriott Hotel in Times Square. And that group, that committee contacted us and asked us if we would run their committee. And I just said, I can't. Once is enough for this. And I said, and you are way too late. You should have started 2 months ago. They already had the shovel in the ground. But their fight got really, really ugly because they were some big stars, Broadway stars, were threatened by Schubert's and all those people that if you continue this, you'll never work in New York again. And I said, well, take heed. Look what happened to us. So, you know, they do that stuff. Those folks don't like having people crossed them. And the Rockefellers were shocked that this happened. And we were shocked we were blackballed. I was very naive. I didn't think they even knew who I was. Now that's kind of stupid since I'm on the Tom Snyder show and all this stuff, but it was not an ego trip for me. It was this mission I had to do. So when it took us about 6 months to find out, and when we found out, we were flabbergasted. And that's one of my pet peeves with Linda Lee Mack. So she knew and she didn't tell me. And we were considered very good friends. So
What did you do after you were blackballed? That's a while ago.
Well, oh yeah. I mean, I went into a funky depression, but I went on tour with a Broadway show. Bill went on tour. He sang. He was a soloist on one of the Mississippi Queen ships up and down the Mississippi River. Steamboats, yeah, which he always wanted to do. And then when he came back is when we started to write songs together. And I decided I didn't want to dance anymore. I was already 33. And, when you get in your early 30s and you're a dancer, your body starts rebelling. You go to do something and it says, I'm not doing that anymore. And I remember going for a walk with Bill and saying, I don't think I want to dance anymore. And he was horrified. And dancers aren't supposed to say that. And what do you want to do? And I said, I don't really care about acting. And we started writing music for fun. I did lyrics and he did the music. And we started writing musicals. And we said, do we want to do this? Are we nuts? And so we did. And of course, we had to get survival jobs. And then we got married. And the rest is history. We've written a few musicals. We only make money with one. It's called Ebenezer. It's a musical version of A Christmas Carol, which is going to get a production this year. Haven't made it to Broadway yet, off Broadway, but we haven't made it to Broadway. It's going to be done in New Jersey this year. So that's what we've done. And then it was, everybody kept saying, write the book. And they kept bugging me. And I couldn't. I was still very upset about what happened to us. And then one morning I opened the New York Times in this apartment. And I said to Bill, look who's dead. And it was Alton Marshall, that creepy man. He died. And something was released in me. Maybe I was afraid of him. I don't know. What else could he do to me? He already made me lose my job. And it was about a month after that, I just started the book and I didn't stop. And all kinds of things have happened since I wrote the book. The book has taken on a life of its own. Our life has changed. I was telling Richard, I'm featured in a documentary about movie palaces, which is really wonderful. And called Going Attractions, a Definitive Story of a Movie Palace. And there was another documentary in the works that was being done by Nancy Gershwin, who I met out there in LA when I did this at the Egyptian Theater. I did this presentation at the Egyptian. And now there's, well, never mind. Richard knows. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to jinx it.
What was the Broadway show that you toured with after this?
I did Ballroom, Michael Bennett's Ballroom. It was a musical version of, it was a TV film called Queen of the Stardust Ball with Maureen Stapleton. And they made a musical of it, and Michael Bennett directed it and did the choreography. And it was just, for a dancer, it was a dream to do. And Janice Page was our star. God, what a wonderful woman. Bill just gave me her book for Christmas. I mean, for my birthday. Yeah, she's still with us, Janice Page. She's a charming lady. Charming.
I love Ballroom. I love the music to Ballroom. I stood for.
Oh, you know Ballroom.
New York years ago. I don't know how much the ticket was, but I stood for that, and it was definitely worth standing for.
Yeah, I loved it too. I saw it and I thought, oh my God, I've got to do this show. I love it, and I was lucky enough to do it. Yeah, nice. And that was my swan song for dancing, I think, wasn't it? Yes, I think it was. Yeah, nice way to go out.
Yeah, it's a great show. Yeah. Such good music.
I should let you guys go.
Well, we should let you go. It's like midnight there now, right? It's almost midnight.
Oh, it's 11:45. well. I'm having so much fun. It doesn't feel like it's this late anymore. Thank you all so much. It was so nice to meet you all.
Come see us. Come see us in LA.
I would love to. I would love to. We're going to have a drink, I promise. Okay. And thank you all for going and telling me about your stories and for watching tonight. This has been great. And Richard, stay in touch, please, my friend.
Absolutely. I want
Okay.
to thank you guys so
Good
much.
night.
This has been delightful. All right. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Later.
Night.